Okay, for our old world snowman, we are going to begin by making the armature. To do that, I'm just crumpling some foil into the shape that I want. You can do it as big as you want or as small as you want. It's entirely up to you. And then once you're happy with the shape, we're gonna go ahead and add some clay. So to add the clay, we're just using bits and breaking it off. If you find that your clay isn't sticking readily, a good idea is to use some diluted white glue. So I'm just gonna add a little glue there. Get an old paintbrush, dip it in some water, and go ahead and cover it. This just helps the paper clay to stick because the aluminum foil is a non-porous surface. So it would stick otherwise, but you could end up with air pockets, and sometimes your clay slips around a bit when you're trying to smooth. So it's an optional step, but I definitely prefer to do it. So go ahead and add your clay. You can smooth as you go along. Make sure everywhere is covered and that there are no air pockets underneath the clay, between the clay and the foil armature. When it's completely covered, we're just gonna smooth it, add our hook and our nose, and then we can leave it to dry. I'm making sure I have a little extra on the top because that's where I'm going to add the hook. Right there needs a little bit more, and right here, anywhere you see foil showing through, just add a little bit more. And then we're going to go ahead and smooth that. And we need a little bit of clay out for the nose. Put your excess clay away in your airtight container so it doesn't dry out. And then dip your finger in some water and begin to smooth. If you have stubborn areas that your fingers aren't smoothing, you can use your sculpting tool. Just to blend out where the edges where the clay joined. So once this is smooth, the next step is going to be to add the nose and the hook. I'm going to add the hook first because I don't want to mess up my nose. That would be the last thing I add. And to add the hook, you're going to need some thin craft wow, a wire cutter or a pair of scissors strong enough to cut it, and a little needle nose or jewelry pliers just to make the hook, the rounded edges of the hook. So we are going to do that next, and then we will add the nose. Okay, to make the hook to hang our little snowman, we're going to need some thin craft wire. This is our 20 gauge. It's by Doris. Thinner would be fine as well, like the type that you use in scrapbooks. And you only need, this is just under an inch it would seem. You don't need a lot. So what we're going to do is just curl up one end like that. Curl it over in the middle. And then curl up the other end. And there you have a little hook. This is what we're going to thread the ribbon through to hang it on the Christmas tree. So all we do here is go ahead and push it down in there and then gently press around to make sure that it's intact. The little hooks that we added will prevent it from slipping out when it's dry. Alright, so our hook is in the top now. So the next stage is deciding where we're gonna put his nose. So which side is the front where you're gonna have his face? That's entirely up to you, of course. And just smooth in a bit more. You can smooth also when it's dry, with sandpaper of course, but whatever you get done now is less work then. So to add the nose we need a bit of a toothpick. Just going to break off the end here and decide where you're going to put the face. So I'm going to put the eyes about right here and here. I'm marking those out because I'm going to use 2 seed beads, 2 black beads, to put in those little dents I just put in there, those little circles. So that way I know now that my nose is going to be about right here. So I'm going to go ahead and push the toothpick rather, I have chopsticks on my mind, in there like that. Now if you want to be absolutely certain that this sticks, you can go ahead and add a little glue. And then get a tad bit of clay and roll it into the shape of a carrot. You can decide how big or small you want his nose. So to me that's a bit too big, it looks more like a beak. So I'm going to make it smaller. Make one end pointier, other end flatter. That is going to be my little nose. Now to make sure that stays on there, go ahead and join those ends like that. And then we're going to add lines. Like what you would see on a carrot. and we will set that aside to dry. Now this is thoroughly dry. I'm just going to give it a quick sand. I'm using a 220 Ultra Flex sanding sponge by 3M. As long as you use a fine grit sandpaper, you should be good. Another great option for sanding is actually nail files, like what you would use with your nails. This is great for getting into areas like that. Now in sanding this, I just realized that my nose is actually a little bit loose. So what I'm going to do is get some white glue and just try get a little bit under there if possible. Maybe I'll just pull it up a bit like that. And I'm going to go ahead and glue that back on. That sometimes happens with smaller pieces that we don't join properly, because there just really is no space to join around it. So that will take care of that. It will only take a few minutes to dry. It won't stop you from moving on with your sculpture. If you had any cracks, you would do a similar thing. You'd add some diluted white glue to the crack and just put a little bit of creative paper clay. Like I'm going to put some right there in that area. Make sure that air is thoroughly wet. I've already added some glue there, so I won't bother add any more. I'm just going to get the tiniest bit of clay and just press it down to fill that little crack where the nose came away. And that is pretty much how you fix a crack. It will dry very quickly, so it shouldn't hold up your progress. So just go ahead, finish sanding. Any more cracks that you come across, you fix them that way. A little diluted white glue, a little worm of clay, a little slither, then you push it down and smooth it off with your finger or a damp paintbrush. So the next thing I'm going to do is add some gesso, but before I do that, my eyes are a little bit smaller than I wanted because I'm going to add a bead. So this is just a very fine drill bit, and I'm just going around just to make that area a little bit wider. If we need to do it once more when we're ready to add the bead, that will be fine, but I like to do it now so no white spots are left after I paint. So I'm going to leave him to dry just for a few minutes, and then I'm going to come back and add the gesso and paint him. Now I'm going to go ahead and add that coat of gesso. I am using Liquitex gesso. It's a clear gesso. You of course can use whichever gesso you have on hand. The gesso helps to prevent the paint from being absorbed by the clay. It is a paper clay, so it will definitely absorb the paint. So we'll have to do less layers of paint when we use the gesso. So we're going to put that aside to dry, and then we're going to go ahead and paint. Our gesso is dry now, and I'm going to use a Folk Art vintage paint. Folk Art is by Plaid Crafts. They have great paints that work well with paper clay, and this is vintage white. I'm not using like just plain white because I think it's just a bit too stark for the look that I'm going for, because I'm kind of going for a vintagey look with my snowman. So I'm gonna give it a coat, maybe two if needed, and set it aside to dry. When it's dry, I'm gonna paint that little carrot nose orange, and then we can begin to add our details. So go ahead and paint your sculpture now. And I will be back with you in a minute. It's dry enough to handle now, so I'm going to go ahead and paint on that carrot color on the nose. I'm using Apple Barrel, also by Plaid Crafts, and it's a jack-o'-lantern. Start at the base and carefully go around the base and then pull up towards the tip of the nose. Great. Now I'm going to put this aside to dry once more, and this time I'm going to leave it for a few hours or maybe even overnight before I move on to the next step. Because in the next step we're going to be applying a stain, and if the paint isn't dry properly, when you rub off the stain you find that it lifts the acrylic paint. So if you're not in a hurry, it's best that you just go ahead and leave this overnight to dry and come back to it tomorrow. Okay, it's fully dry now, and I'm going to stain the piece. To do this you need to have paper towel, damp cloth, wet wipe, like a baby wipe, not the ones with alcohol in it, and of course your antique and medium. This is by Plaid Crafts as well. Folk Art is the brand, and it is apple butter brown. You'll need a paintbrush to apply it, and I'm using a paper towel and a spray bottle of water to wipe it back off. The depth of the color that you want has to do with how long you actually leave the stain on. So I'm gonna go ahead and quickly cover this. A bigger piece you would actually work in little sections at a time, but because this is so small, I'm just going to quickly cover it with the stain, taking care to get down in all those little nooks and crannies, because those will give us fabulous texture when we wipe it back off. I know it looks a bit scary right now because you think all your hard work, I've just covered it up with brown, but it's actually gonna look good when it's finished. So as fast as I put it on, I'm going to take it off. So I'm gently rubbing now. To get off the stain. Now I don't want it that dark. That's too dark for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dampen my paper towel. That's why I have a spray bottle of water handy. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe it. As you can see, it makes a huge difference when the paper towel is damp. Another option, as I said before, would be to use a wet wipe. You may have to turn your cloth around, or your wet wipe, paper towel, whatever you're using, because you'll find that it will just keep reapplying stain in areas that you've already taken off the stain. So you can see it just slightly discolors it, giving it that aged look, and it leaves the stain in all the little areas and it adds texture. It adds character to the piece. So once you're happy with that, put it aside to dry. And then all we have left to do will be our decorating. The last thing I want you to do before you varnish is go ahead and just add some little buttons going down like that. Put that aside to dry. When it's dry, give it a spray of varnish. I will not do that on camera because I do not want to ruin my lens, and plus it's best to do it outdoors. And then we will just embellish. For this stage, you're going to need your glue gun, so go ahead and plug that in. We're going to use that to secure the scarf that we're gonna make from a piece of felt. So here I have my scrap of felt, and I am just going to cut off. It's just under 1/2 inch thick, I would say. And I'm gonna measure that to make sure that it's long enough. Yep, definitely should be. Let me just trim up this edge right here, so it's even. And what I'm gonna do with that is put it around his little neck right here. One piece under, like that. Pull down, other piece on top. So as soon as my heat gun is ready, I'm just going to secure that right there with my heat gun and then bring it down like that. You can decide if you want it off to a side at this point. I think I'm going to do mine off to the side. It looks quite cute, plus I don't want to hide his buttons. So let me just check how this glue gun, sorry, is warming up. So I'm going to go ahead and secure that right there. And then once again right here. And I'm going to let that dry. When it's set, I'm going to just add a little fringe to the bottom of the scarf. If you want, you can secure the back area also to prevent it slipping down. Right, so let me just move that glue gun out the way, and I'm going to leave that to dry and work on my eyes now. So I have 2 little seed beads here, so I want to get those in those holes. I still don't think it was wide enough, so I'm just going to use the tip of my scissors. Because it's paper clay, you can do this and widen the holes. Then I'm going to get some glue. This is just an embellishment glue. It's Nouveau. It's my favorite embellishment glue. It holds anything. And then I'm going to push those beads down into those little sockets that we made. Now that's dry. I'm going to go ahead and just make a little fringe here. And then I'm going to get a piece of raffia to tie so I can hang my snowman. Here is my piece of raffia. Of course, if you want, you could use any braided ribbon like this, or yarn, or any ribbon really, to hang it. But I like the look of the raffia. So I'm gonna want it fairly thick. That's why I'm going over it several times like that. And then I'm gonna thread it through that hole that we made. That little hook. And tie the knot on top. It's kind of tricky because there's so many strands, but it will look good once it's done. There we go, that's good enough. And that will be how you hang your little snowman. So there you have it, your little vintage snowman ornament to hang on your tree this year. I do hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. And hop on over to my blog, SuzetteHussey.com, sign up for my newsletter, and take a look at other classes I actually have now. I have my new website, papermachepatch.com, which has loads of classes using creative paper clay. Thank you once again, and have a good holiday.